One of the things that we've been watching, Brian, or have started to watch, is the brand new season of Dark Side of the Ring has debuted as of this past Tuesday. Next week or this week, depending on how you look at these things. What week? What day is it? It's April 1st. It's April Fool's Day on Tuesday this week. So that's perfect for Tony Halm, Ludwig Borga. But the season debut was the Hell in a Cell match, and this is what I was trying to explain to you, Brian. When I was trying to explain to you that it was all about Mick's viewpoint, Mick's mindset. Mick Foley is a person. They interviewed his family, and etc. As to what the point was of the broadcast, and dissecting just that moment or that match or that night in his life and what his motivation was, as Finkel would say. And I just didn't do a good job explaining it to you, but now you see what I was talking about. Although, and Francois was the star of the show, as I figured he would be.
Was that a question?
Yes. But you see what I was talking about now as to the slant of the program.
Who was?
Is everybody was talking about poor, Mick needs to, and even Mick said that. He was a kid that got teased and he always wanted to be loved.
Do you know when?
But what were you going to say?
I was going to say Francois Petit, his neighbor in Santa Monica, I think across the street, was Bob Barnett. Because Bob used to see the wrestlers coming in and out of Francois's house. He's like, hey, something's going on over there.
Is that one of those houses that Barnett repossessed from his clients that couldn't pay him?
Maybe Leno, actually. I'm not exactly sure.
I thought Leno would be the client that couldn't pay him, but yes.
I think I had very low expectations for this one, and we've seen so much about this is one of the most famous matches in history. I think Darkseid did a better job than anyone's ever done telling the story of the match. I think this is one of the best episodes they've ever done. I was surprised.
Well, it's refreshing to hear you say that.
And I think part of the reason, too, was they kind of had just about every voice they needed. I know Jim Ross didn't do anything with them for a few years after the fallout from the Plane Ride from Hell episode. I'm glad he was a part of this. You needed him. Jimmy Corderas was great. I know Terry's not here, but we were able to kind of feel Terry's presence because everyone was relaying how he was involved in all this. I thought this was one of the best episodes they've ever done.
Well, and especially with the family's viewpoint of what he was doing, and how Colette, many times was not happy, as they say, over stuff that she had to see on TV. And, again, we know the story, which they didn't spend a ton of time on, that Cactus was not, Vince didn't see in Cactus Jack what everybody else saw as a wrestling talent. And, he'd been doing the Japanese death matches with Terry and all that stuff. And JR did make a big pitch, give him a chance. And I think, wasn't that the famous quote that Vince told JR, said, I'm going to do this just so I can see the look on your face when your talent fails or whatever, something to that effect.
Hey, you love hearing that from your boss.
Well, yeah,
right.
But it just, because he wouldn't leave it alone. And of course, my comment was when they brought him in as Mankind, because Vince had whatever he had in mind. This bogus bullshit wouldn't have worked with anybody besides Mick Foley. Because it was just, it had Mankind who lived, secluded from normal society in a cellar somewhere or whatever the fuck, that had some horror movie oomph to it, but Vince was going to cartoon it up and gimmick it up until he got to realize, after he'd been around Mick for a little while, he got to realize Mick was a talent, right? We've told that story before, but that was the thing, is he still had the gimmick, but he had to make something out of it, and he did. And, again, Terry joking with him, well, Cactus, you ought to start on top of the thing and let him throw you off of it or whatever. And so Mick thinks, well, maybe we could. But I think what do you think anybody that might stumble upon this program that's not a wrestling fan is just sitting there one night and sees this start and decides to give it a minute. And the story of the actual match, again, has been told, like you said, and highlights have been replayed, but not with just, this was like a training school breakdown along with a call of a car crash, to where each thing that went wrong for Mick was studied in great detail. The zip ties popping and the bump off the top and then the bump through the thing and blah, blah, blah. From everybody's viewpoint. And I think this was the ultimate match breakdown ever done on television, wasn't it? From that perspective?
I don't know, because I got to think about what to compare it to. I thought it was really good for that reason. Again, you had all these different voices. You never really hear Jimmy Corderas and Jim Ross and Jim Cornette and Mick Foley talking about the exact same thing. And, they had, I don't know if they talked to the Undertaker on the phone or they just got some bootleg tape of him.
I think that's probably from some podcast somewhere.
Yeah, well, they got some audio of the Undertaker, so at least there was something there, because there were a few holes he needed filled in. You're not going to get Vince for this kind of thing. You got Francois. I thought it was a great, and again, it's all different perspectives. You have office, referee, doctor. I mean, everyone had a different perspective of it. And I thought specifically the breakdown of him being thrown off the cage and everyone's reaction, and how he actually did take a flat back bump, although he immediately went flying off the table.
Well, yeah, there was an element of bouncing going on after that.
But I thought the breakdown of that was great. I was so impressed with the way they did this episode, because it's a topic I was kind of a little sick of. I wasn't really interested in seeing another thing about this, and I think they nailed it.
Well, Colette had the perfect sentence that explains a lot about pro wrestling if you understand it. It's so simple, some people may not understand it. But talking about the bump off the top of the cage and onto the table, Colette said, if he can see it, he can do it. And see, that's the thing. It applies to more than Mick, just that's an extreme example of it. But the reason why a lot of the top guys in wrestling had their own bump that they came to be known for, or bumps, or, moves, whatever, that was different, that was unusual, that was eye-catching, that then people would imitate ad nauseum. They could see it in their head. You can't do something unless you can see yourself doing it. I'm physically. Am I explaining that right? If you can try to do something that somebody else did, and you're gonna probably fuck it up, and depending on how good athletically you are. But the people that invent that shit, they can just see it and see themselves doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, still there's the ability to somehow make it work even while it's happening. I think it was you in the episode that pointed out how midair he kind of had to turn his body. He's watching.
Well, yeah.
He's watching where he's going, but he also, I mean, it's all really quick. He says it took forever as it was happening, but it was so quick. And, if he had made the wrong move, it would have been a different thing. He would have landed a little differently, whatever. He kind of did it perfectly, if you're going to do it.
Yeah, that was the best that it could be done. And that's what I always told him, it was his Citizen Kane bump. I said, don't worry if you still have a long, successful career. Just figure this is the best thing you've ever done. Don't try to top it. The results could be, less than pleasant. And the motivation for him to get back up. And getting back up is what made him. Because again, anybody, no matter where they were in the building watching that, was pretty convinced, and on both sides, the office and us in the back and the people in the seats, was pretty convinced that was it, because we didn't think he could actually get back up. And getting back up is what made him, again, that elevated him to the next level in people's eyes, and when it was replayed and talked about, et cetera, et cetera.
You know whose name I haven't mentioned, but he was great in here too. You brought up the back. I was thinking of the truck, Jerry Briscoe.
Yes. Gerald is fucking, well, he's always great.
But we never really hear his perspective of this match, and the fact that he was there right in front of the monitors as everything was happening.
Yeah, and again, the people back at the gorilla position we're on pay-per-view. They're not just gonna, they don't know what's happening. That's why they didn't cut it off. They didn't rush right out. It was, because technically it was planned for him to do that. It just wasn't planned for him to be, so incapacitated he couldn't continue, and nobody was sure. And they were taking their time. And then when they successfully restart the thing and he gets choke slammed through the cage, and again, remember we've talked about this before, but Mick said he thought there would be some snapping and giving way of the deal, and he'd kind of have time to adjust, and it just instantly went out from under him, and boom, and down he goes with that fucking chair on his face. And that's what fucked him up. The bump off the cage separated his shoulder and did some other things, but he was fine mentally there. But then when he landed not only at 100 miles an hour back of his head first on that concrete ring, but the chair caved his face in at the other. That's like being concertoed, isn't it? For real. And guess what? He didn't fucking get up for a while. And that was when Colette was fucking. He didn't tell me about that one. He didn't know about that one. And then that's when Terry tried to come back and kill or come out and kill some time and etc.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that because obviously, in a perfect world, once he's out, the thing would end. But I remember watching it live, let alone I can imagine what you guys were dealing with being there. It all was happening so quick. It didn't seem like anyone knew where this was going or how it could end. So we'll get back to the Terry thing, but in terms of Colette, she said she was calling the office and calling everyone she could. How often did you guys in the office actually hear from wives of wrestlers about whether it was just, forget about everyday issues, but specifically things they were seeing on TV or on pay-per-view?
Well, think about this, though. She wasn't calling everybody in the office because there was no cell phones. There was, if you needed to, you could call. You had Vince's secretary's number, or Ann Russo in talent relations, or some Finkel. There could be a call placed to the office, not necessarily at 1241 East Main Street, but somebody working for the company. And if you had, enough pull, you could find out the goddamn building number or somebody at the building to get through to Vince. And they have to run down the hall. And there was no texting, and beepers. We have beepers, so there could be some beeping going on. So a lot of that is, Colette said she's calling. She might have been beeping Mick, or she might have been calling a goddamn, whoever the office person was to have you heard something or whatever. But you couldn't just get right through to the locker room or to the gorilla position in, the late 90s even. Right as I left and came to Louisville, I think, is where Vince made everybody start getting what they call them, the Blackberries.
Oh yeah. I used to have one
where you could type messages to people or whatever. I just avoided that by like months. So anyway, nevertheless, and then maybe there might have been early cell phone. She might have been, Mick might have had a cell phone. It was in his bag. Maybe I'm not saying that, the boys had disposable income, although Mick was noticeably cheap. So at some point, I don't know. But point being, we were never inundated by mad wives. The secretaries at the office were on some occasions during normal business hours. And that's one thing is, after the match and the aftermath and the attention that it got and everything. And like I said, it did elevate Mick because people are like, what the fuck? We've never seen anything like this. And in a way, we've never seen anything like it again since. People have tried to do bullshit to top it, but because they were trying to, that's why they couldn't. But Mick, in this episode, he credited that for his career renaissance I think really it wasn't a renaissance. I think it was a whole nother level that he'd ever been at before, rather than returning him to glory day. He was always thinking that he wasn't over anymore, or he was, if the creative wasn't good for a particular period, it's like, oh, this is the end of they don't care anymore. And that was kind of the mindset here, but it wasn't a renaissance as much as an elevation. And then he won the title a few months later, or whatever it was. And he credited for turning Vince's mind around about it, but it was already turned. Vince's mind was already turned at that point. And what we in the office credited for just making it easier to include Mankind or Mick or what any that person in anything was when Mick did the sit down interviews with Jim Ross and just did his own shit, and just, whether it was the stabbing with the fork or the pulling the hair or the voice or the material, the delivery, that's when all of a sudden Vince started perking up about him after that. Because he saw a slovenly, fucking instead of a creative genius. But anyway, that's the thing is, once Vince saw that part about him, he was willing to overlook the physique and the visual presentation, because he got into Mick as a person, and that's what you had to do. Any of the guys he had to get into you, what you were doing as a character, or whatever the word, the personality, the gimmick, whatever word you want to use for it, instead of what you looked like. And then you had a better chance. But then you mentioned Colette earlier and the effect on the family. They closed up with the I Quit match with Rock, which was his last, oh my God thing, like to this level. And my comment there was he got brain damage for a fucking wrestling angle on television. Colette hated that. And so did I. And a lot of people did too.
They didn't even bring up the fact that that's when Barry Blaustein was making his movie, so there were cameras all over Colette and the kids as it was happening.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, it looked like to the naked eye that there's Colette and the kids there. It looked like the company had planted them there for this, horrible reaction, when in actuality they were being shot for a movie already and were there to get reactions, but they didn't know they were going to see Cactus get his head caved in. But and here's my problem. Besides the fact that then the neurologist finally said, no, don't do this anymore. Wonder why. I love Cactus, but this was bad for him personally, bad to show his kids and his wife, and also even bad for the business, because it went too far. It even went past the point where, if you want to make people uncomfortable, right, to create some element of buzz or feedback or what, it went past uncomfortable and, oh, come on now. Because they said it was 11 chair shots. I think they'd originally said, 5 or 6. With his hands handcuffed behind his back, you can't block it. Okay. Then, first of all, what is the line? If you're going to let somebody give you real chair shots with none of the art of professional wrestling involved, then what about just going, give him a ball peen hammer? Right? Where is the line between the art of what we do and trying to make it look real and be real and make a point, and then just, well, fuck, this is just kind of stupid. If a professional, and I've said this a million times, and people say, oh, he wants to do angles with chair shots in in the year 2525. If a man was still alive that knew how to fucking do one and knew how to take one, yes, it's a lot safer. I saw chair shots on a regular if not nightly, weekly basis that I would have rather taken than goddamn 16 different things in any match in an AEW television program. There's an element of art to the thing and athletic talent as well. And occasionally you want to whack a son of a bitch over the head one time. And he wants you to whack him. You got to get mutual agreement on these things to make the point and do the angle and tell the story. And oh my God, and nobody could see through that one. And that's going to make you money. And then there's just, if you get up after 10, what the fuck? Besides the fact that people now know what everybody involved is kind of an idiot here. Then what the fuck can you do next time to make the point except hit the son of a bitch 12 times? So, and that's what I've always thought. Mick is, love him to death and what a great talent. But people wanting to imitate him and exceed him when he already, in too many cases, wanted to outdo himself has led to a lot of stupid shit taking place. A lot of bullshit going on.
Well, that match specifically, I think, is the cause of how popular thumbtacks, unfortunately, became in wrestling.
There you go. You know, and that's, again, if everybody look close, Mick, he's a one-of-a-kind guy. And he's so clever, he's so intelligent, and he does the shows to keep his mind stimulated, but he wrote a fucking best-selling book in longhand, right? He's at various points been a very intelligent and successful person. So if you can't imitate that too, when you get people to look at you because you got thumbtacks stuck in your fucking ass, then just don't stick the thumbtacks in your ass, right? Just because you can cut your own ear off doesn't mean you're Van Gogh, to quote myself from some time back.
You may be tied up in the ropes wrestling against Vader in Europe.
Vader. I told him that guy they called Vader. It was the guy they called Vader. He tore his ear off.
I still remember a really bad joke from WCW magazine when I was 12. If Ella Fitzgerald married Big Van Vader, she'd be Ella Vader.
You know what you'd get if an elephant fucked a rhino?
Yeah, I know.
Elephino.
This is your show. This is your show. I just want to remind you, wherever we're going next is up to you.
All right. Anyway, but the point of the program of Dark Side of the Ring was Mick said, I wanted to be loved. And Colette said he needed to feel accepted. And so, kids, maybe there's an easier way, but we love Mick. Next week, Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern, where all the civilized people live, on Vice TV is Dark Side of the Ring for the next 9 more weeks now, 10 shows a season, and it's Tony Halm, a.k.a. Ludwig Borga, and the sordid tales that we talked to Evan Husty about a while back about his various dealings over there in, goddamn, where is it now? I've lost his, Latvia, Finland. We're Latvia. We're Latveria. Where did Dr. Doom reside? That was Latveria, wasn't it?
Maybe.
See, you just it ain't on the tip of your tongue, is it?
Certainly is not.
Well, I'll tell you what is going to be on the tip of my tongue if I have to watch any more of the gall darn wrestling than what we have already done over the last week. Naked Wine's going to be on the tip of my tongue. It's going to be going down my gullet. It's going to be sloshing around in my belly. Get in my belly, you Naked Wines, because I'm going to need to be crocked. I'm going to need to be plastered, blistered, blitzed, schnookered. I'm going to need to be slightly buzzed to watch any more wrestling after this past week. But they can help you with all of those things. Did you get the new bottle of the rosé schnookered?
I did not. I don't know if that's an official brand that they carry, but Naked Wines carries great wine, great brands of wine.
Well, yeah, because the white wine is slightly buzzed, but the red is schnookered.
Yeah, again, I'm not exactly sure if that's the official determination or designation, classification.
No, it's a food and Drug Administration, actually.
Oh.
It's a thing where they give it designations depending on how many sips you can take before you can't operate heavy machinery. But anyway, folks, if you're still buying the wine like it's 1999, you're going into a store and you're dealing with people and they're pushy. They're pushy, these salesmen, because if you don't know anything about wine, they're just going to sell you the expensive stuff, and it's really shit that their cousin Luke brewed in a bathtub. But the people at Naked Wines have been around for over 15 years, and they are dealing with and funding over 90 independent winemakers around the world, from here all the way to Bolivia. You know, they got that Bolivian wine.
I don't know that, and we have no guarantees of that, and you have some weird obsession with Bolivia.
I'm telling you, we're big in Bolivia. I told you that the other day. We've got a huge audience in Bolivia that loves to be talked about. And Carrollton, we're coming to Carrollton if I only had time. But nevertheless, the Naked Wines, folks, they find all these independent winemakers, and then they corral all this wine together, and you get to have it shipped directly to your door with no commitments or membership fees. You can enjoy Naked Wines hassle-free and clothing-free. That's part of the deal.
No.
You almost feel obligated to go ahead when the box gets here and take your clothes off, sit cross-legged in the middle of the floor, and guzzle some of the finest hooch that they have gathered from across the world, from all of these wineries and graperies and factories.
None of this is hooch. There is no obligation to be naked. It's not implied. It's not an obligation. You could do what you want once you close the door and enjoy your wine on your own. But it is not.
Well, you sound like a narc. You're taking all the fun out of it. I'm telling you. What the hell? I'm trying to get people
out of trouble. I am too. I want people to have fun and not be in trouble. You're trying to get everyone in trouble.
They're only 20% of Naked Wines' customers have welfare checks called into the police department on them after drinking naked. That's a made up.
That is a made up stat. There is no study. Who's funding that study? There's no study. There are no stats. That is not a real thing. And of course, what we're doing is having fun, and what you would do is have fun when you drink your Naked Wine. Clothes are optional once the doors are closed, but you can enjoy the wine. Doors open and doors closed from Naked Wines. Jim, how can they do that?
Well, and basically, if the wine is, the clothes can be taken right off. If you whip the label off, then you're just looking at a naked bottle, and some people find that erogenous. But folks, what you can do is you can go to nakedwines.com/JCE and click enter voucher and put in the code JCE. That's the code and the password. And you're going to get 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99 with the shipping included. And you not only get that, but you also get to obviously choose the kind of wines that you're interested in from this incredible array of fermented beverage that is from vineyard to your door. There's still grape peelings in some of the boxes. And as a matter of fact, did you hear that they got one of the women that stomped the grapes? They found a toe in a bottle of rosé. Because apparently,
I don't know. Well, let's just there's no she, there's no toe. It's not any rosé.
They thought it was
female. You wouldn't be getting this toe rosé from the fine wines at Naked Wines. Once again, Jim.
Well, the thing is, they couldn't tell for sure that it was female, but most of the grape stompers are of the female gender.
You don't know this. Again,
we're just assuming, but
don't worry.
The toe rosé is not included in the 6 bottles for $39.99. It's much more expensive. They can't do the deal on that.
Some might call it tosé.
Well, that's right. The tosé, it's a delicacy in some of the South American countries. But again, folks, nakedwines.com/JCE and click enter voucher. Put in JCE. That's the code, the password for 6 bottles of wine, $39.99, shipping free. And then the folks at Naked Wines, and they'll have you hooked. You won't be able to get You won't be able to, a day won't go by that you don't want a bottle of wine from Naked Wines and just whip off all your clothes in front of the television set. Hopefully the babysitter's gone home by then, and just enjoy relaxing in this hurry scurry world.
And actually, we'd like to hear from you. We have the Naked Wine test. Drink some wine from Naked Wine and watch wrestling and see if it makes it better, and let us know.
Yes. Well, but then
with your clothes on.
Yeah, you'd have to keep your clothes on because that'd feel really dirty watching wrestling naked.
Well, who's in the ring?
Well, that's the thing. Look, well, anymore it doesn't really matter, does it? It just kind of be embarrassing. You're doing two dirty things at the same time. You're being naked and you're watching wrestling. You don't want people to know you're doing either.
Those are dirty, but what's not dirty is the clean, fine wine. I don't know if you talk about cleanliness in wine, but the fine wine you get from Naked Wines. One more time, one last time. Jim, how can the listeners get this wonderful deal on wonderful wine?
That's another thing about Naked Wines. They strain their wine so it's all toe-free. So you can get the Tosé without any lumps in it. Head to nakedwines.com.
Yes.
Yes, that's what we want them to. nakedwines.com/JCE. Click enter voucher. JCE is your code, your password. Everything you need to know except where you live. You need to know that, and you need to tell them. And then they'll come and find you. $39.99, free shipping, 6 bottles of wine. Boy, howdy, don't operate heavy machinery for at least 2 hours per bottle of wine.
Once again, Naked Wines, a fine wine, friends of ours. Let them be friends of yours. Naked Wines, promo code.
After 6 bottles of wine, you'll be friendly with almost anybody.
JCE.